All right, welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Ready to dive into something pretty fascinating today.
Always ready.
Yeah, we're going way back in time for this one. Going to be looking at the European Renaissance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I know people think, oh, the Renaissance, like paintings and stuff, but it's a lot more than that, you know, and a lot more interesting than just names and dates too.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is like you said, way more than just paintings. I mean, yeah, we'll definitely get to the art, but it was a complete transformation, like a rebirth of how people thought, about themselves, about the world.
It's like a bridge between the Middle Ages and, the start of the modern world.
Totally. It set the stage for so much of what we take for granted today, like our ideas about individual potential, about science, about exploration, it's all connected.
Yeah, it's a period that spanned what, from the 14th to the 16th centuries,
Mhm.
give or take.
Yeah, roughly. Some scholars stretch it into the early 17th century, depending on how you define it, which we can get into later. But yeah, that's the general time frame.
Okay, cool. So our mission today is to kind of unpack all of that, see how it all started, what the big changes were, and what it all means for us today. We've got a good mix of sources for this one. We've got some YouTube transcripts from, let's see, History Chronicles, 5 Minutes. Rick Steves is Europe, always a good one.
Oh yeah, I love Rick Steves.
And we've got, oh yeah, an interesting blog post from Blog's Quiz Shop.
Interesting. Interesting. Looking forward to that one.
So let's just jump right in. First things first. What exactly does Renaissance even mean?
Well, it literally means rebirth.
Rebirth.
And
Okay.
and that's really what it was, a rediscovery and reawakening of classical Greek and Roman knowledge. Like they were rediscovering these ancient texts and these ideas about human potential and achievement, and it just sparked this explosion of creativity, in art, in science, in literature, in pretty much every field you can imagine.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just copying the ancients, they were building on it, taking those ideas and making them their own, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, so not just looking back, but like using the past to launch something new.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Okay, so we know what it means. Where did this rebirth, where did it all begin?
Well, the heart of it, the early Renaissance really took root in Italy.
Italy. Okay.
Yeah, specifically in a city you might have heard of, Florence.
Oh, sure, Florence, yeah.
Florence in the 14th century became incredibly wealthy. They had these vast trade networks, especially with the Ottoman Empire and
Mm.
all that wealth. It really fueled the early stages of the Renaissance. It gave them the resources to support artists and scholars and all these amazing projects.
Right, because you got to have, money to make the art happen.
Exactly. I mean, you need patrons, people with money who are willing to invest in these creative endeavors.
Now, it wasn't just Florence though, right?
No. No, definitely not. You had other city-states in Italy that were also like major players. Venice, for example, with its incredible maritime power, its trade routes all over the Mediterranean, and Milan, a real powerhouse in terms of economics and industry. And of course, Rome, the historical heart of the Roman Empire. Each of these cities, they had their own unique character, their own flavor, and they all contributed to the richness of the Renaissance.
It's like a competitive spirit, but in a good way.
Yeah, I think so. Like each city trying to outdo the others in terms of art and culture and innovation, and that really pushed everyone forward.
Yeah, makes sense. And speaking of Florence, you can't really talk about Florence and the Renaissance without mentioning one very powerful family, right?
Vinci.
Medicis. Yeah, they were what, like bankers?
Yeah, bankers, merchants, really savvy business people. They amassed a huge fortune and they became incredibly influential in Florence, both politically and culturally. And they were huge patrons of the arts. Like some of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, they were supported by the Medici, like Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci.
Wow, so they were like tastemakers too, kind of shaping the art world.
Totally. Yeah, they had this incredible eye for talent and they weren't afraid to spend their money to support it. And it wasn't just about having beautiful things. It was also about prestige. Like by sponsoring these artists and these grand projects, they were elevating the status of Florence itself.
Showing off a bit.
Yeah, a bit of that, but also genuinely passionate about beauty and about supporting these incredible talents.
Yeah, we keep talking about this new way of thinking, this shift from the medieval mindset to something different. And I think the term that keeps coming up is humanism.
Humanism, yeah, that's really at the core of the Renaissance. It's a philosophy, a way of looking at the world that really put humans at the center.
Okay, so like people over divine stuff.
Yeah, kind of. It's not that they were, abandoning religion altogether, but it was a shifting focus from the purely spiritual to the human experience, to the potential of human beings to achieve great things in this world. And they were inspired by the ancient Greeks and Romans who, they really celebrated human reason and achievement.
So humanism was about what, like individual potential.
That's a big part of it. Yeah. This idea that humans weren't just, sinners waiting for salvation, but that they had this inherent ability to learn and grow and create amazing things.
Okay, and this was a big departure from like the medieval way of thinking.
Oh yeah, huge. Like in the Middle Ages, everything revolved around the church and God's plan, and people were, supposed to be humble and obedient. And then comes humanism, and it's like, hey, humans are capable of amazing things. Let's celebrate that. Let's explore potential. It was really revolutionary.
Yeah, I can see that. And were there like specific people who really pushed this humanism forward?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. One of the key figures is Petrarch. He's often called the father of humanism, which I know sounds a bit grand, but he really was instrumental.
Okay.
He was this Italian scholar and poet who lived in the 14th century, and he was obsessed with classical literature, with the writings of ancient Rome. He spent years searching for and copying and translating these old manuscripts, and he was convinced that by studying these works, by rediscovering the wisdom of the ancients, we could improve ourselves and create a better world. Like he saw it as this path to moral and intellectual growth. Yeah, and he wasn't alone. There were others like Boccaccio, another Italian writer who shared this passion for the classics, and together they really helped to revive interest in classical culture and those humanistic ideas.
So Petrarch and Boccaccio, they're kickstarting this whole thing.
Yeah, in a big way. And what's really interesting is that humanism, it wasn't just this one thing. It kind of evolved over time. Like there's this early phase that focused on Latin literature, but then there's this later phase where there's this huge surge of interest in Greek scholarship as well, and they start rediscovering and translating the works of Plato and Aristotle, and that brings in a whole other set of ideas and influences.
So it's like humanism 1.0 and then like an upgrade.
Haha, yeah, kind of. And each phase had its own emphasis and its own impact on how the Renaissance unfolded.
And this rediscovery of the classics, it had a big impact on education too, right?
Oh yeah, huge. Like before the Renaissance, education was mostly about, religious training, about preparing for the priesthood. But with humanism, you get this new emphasis on what they called the studia humanitatis.
Studio, what was it?
Studia humanitatis. It's Latin for studies of humanity, basically, and it included subjects like grammar and rhetoric and history and poetry and moral philosophy. So it was about developing well-rounded individuals who could think critically and communicate effectively and participate in civic life. It
Okay.
was about cultivating virtue and knowledge for the sake of improving society as a whole.
So a well-rounded education, not just like religious stuff.
Right. And that's a really important point because it shows how humanism it was about more than just, personal enlightenment. It was about using that knowledge and that virtue to serve the common good.
Right, which is where I guess that term civic humanism comes in.
Exactly. Civic humanism took those humanistic ideals and applied them to the public sphere. It emphasized the importance of active citizenship, of educated individuals using their skills and their knowledge to serve their communities and make a difference.
So it's like humanism goes to City Hall.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. And there were some really influential thinkers who articulated these ideas, like Leonardo Bruni. He was this Florentine statesman and humanist scholar, and he wrote about the ideal citizen, someone who was, well educated and virtuous and dedicated to public service.
Dedicated to making things better.
Exactly. And another key figure is Baldassare Castiglione. He wrote this book called The Courtier, which it was basically like a guidebook for how to be a perfect gentleman, like
Yeah.
how to be witty and charming and knowledgeable about all sorts of things, but also how to be a good leader and a good citizen.
So it wasn't just about being smart. It was about like putting that smarts to good use.
Precisely. And all of these ideas, they really contributed to this growing sense of individualism, like individuals having the power to shape their own destinies and the responsibility to contribute to the greater good. And alongside this, you also have a growing trend of secularism, a gradual, separating of religion from other aspects of life. Though it's a complex process, and it didn't happen overnight.
So humanism is kind of the engine behind all these changes, right? Like it's the underlying philosophy that's driving everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, but it's not the only factor.
Right.
There were all these other things happening at the same time that kind of came together to create this perfect storm for the Renaissance.
So like what else is going on that's making all this happen?
Well, one of the big ones is the fall of Constantinople in 1453.
Okay, Constantinople, that's in modern day Turkey, right?
Okay, Constantinople, that's modern day Turkey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which was, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire. And it was this incredible city, a center of learning and culture and trade, and it had been around for centuries. But in 1453, it was conquered by the Ottoman Turks.
And this matters for the Renaissance, Al.
Well, when Constantinople fell, many, many Greek scholars who lived there, they fled westward into Europe.
Hmm.
And they brought with them their knowledge, their books, their manuscripts of ancient Greek texts. So suddenly you have this influx of classical learning into Europe.
Like refugees bringing their intellectual treasure with them.
Yeah, exactly. And it had a huge impact on the Renaissance because it gave scholars in Europe access to all sorts of texts that they hadn't been able to study before, like works by Plato, Aristotle, all these incredibly important thinkers.
Wow, so this one event, it kind of like supercharges the whole Renaissance.
Yeah, you could say that it's one of those historical turning points.
Right, right.
Now, another factor, and this one's a bit grim, but it's important. The Black Death.
Black Death, the plague.
Yeah, the bubonic plague. It's swept through Europe in the mid 14th century. And it was devastating. Killed like millions of people.
Yeah, we're talking like a third of the population.
Yeah, somewhere around there, depending on the region. It was horrific. But it also, in a strange way, it kind of helped to pave the way for the Renaissance.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it really shook things up. It made people question everything. Like, why is this happening? What's the meaning of life? What's our place in the universe? Like all those big questions. And that kind of questioning spirit, that's at the heart of the Renaissance.
Like questioning the old order, questioning the way things had always been done.
Yeah, exactly. And the plague also had some practical effects that indirectly contributed to the Renaissance. Like because it killed so many people, there were labor shortages, and that meant that workers had more bargaining power. They could demand higher wages. They could move around more easily.
Right, they weren't as tied to the land, to the feudal system.
Exactly. And that led to a decline in feudalism and a rise in social mobility. Like people had more opportunities to improve their lives, to move up in the world. And that kind of dynamism, that energy, it really fed into the Renaissance.
So this horrible tragedy, it kind of like accidentally created some of the conditions that allowed the Renaissance to flourish.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It's one of those weird historical ironies.
And we've talked about the rise of these powerful city-states in Italy. That's a big factor too, right?
Definitely. I mean, these city-states, they were like little mini countries. They had their own governments, their own economies, their own militaries, and they were incredibly wealthy thanks to trade. And that wealth, it allowed them to support the arts, to fund universities, to build beautiful buildings and infrastructure.
And they were competing with each other, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to outdo each other.
Absolutely. And that competition, it was good for the Renaissance. It pushed everyone to be more innovative, more creative.
Okay.
And then you have another huge factor that comes along, the printing press.
Oh yeah, the printing press. Got to talk about that.
Yeah, this was massive. It was invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid 15th century, and it completely revolutionized the way that information was spread.
Like before the printing press, everything was like handwritten, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And that meant that books were super expensive and really rare. Only the very wealthy and the church had access to them. But with the printing press, suddenly you could mass produce books. And that meant that knowledge and ideas could spread much more quickly and much more widely.
It's like going from dial-up to broadband.
Haha, yeah, something like that. And it had a huge impact on the Renaissance. Like suddenly people could read the works of Petrarch and Boccaccio and all these other humanist thinkers. They could read the Bible for themselves, without having to rely on the church's interpretation. It was a real game changer.
So the printing press, it's like the amplifier for the Renaissance.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've got all these factors coming together. Humanism, the fall of Constantinople, the Black Death, the rise of city-states, the printing press. And it all leads to some pretty incredible changes, especially in the world of art.
Oh yeah, the art of the Renaissance it's just mind-blowing, and it's really where you see those humanistic ideals, those ideas about human potential and the beauty of the human form. They're really expressed in the art.
So how is it different from like medieval art?
Well, for one thing, it's much more realistic. Like medieval art was very, very stylized,
Hmm.
very symbolic. The figures were often flat and kind of stiff looking. But Renaissance artists, they were obsessed with anatomy, with understanding the human body, and they used techniques like linear perspective to create a sense of depth and realism in their paintings.
And they weren't just painting like religious scenes, right?
No, definitely not. I mean, religious art was still very important, but you also see a lot more secular art that depicts scenes from everyday life, from classical mythology, from history.
So it's like broadening the horizons of what art could be.
Exactly. And it's all about celebrating the human experience, and the
Yeah.
skill of these artists. It's just incredible. Like they were able to create these incredibly lifelike figures, these scenes that just draw you in.
But yeah, we're talking about like some of the most famous artists of all time, right? Like
Yeah.
Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael.
Exactly. I mean, those are the big names, the superstars of the High Renaissance. But there were so many other talented artists working during this period, and they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They were experimenting with new techniques, with new materials, with new ways of seeing the world.
And they were supported by these wealthy patrons, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Medici, they were huge supporters of the arts,
Hmm.
but there were other wealthy families and individuals who also played a really important role. Like patronage was essential for artists to be able to create their work.
Right, because you got to pay the bills.
Exactly. And the patrons, they weren't just, throwing money around. They had a lot of influence on what art was produced. They would commission specific works. They would give artists feedback. They would help to shape the direction of artistic trends.
So it was a real collaboration.
Definitely.
Okay, so some amazing art is coming out of the Renaissance. What about science? Is there a Renaissance happening there too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Renaissance is all about questioning the world,
Uh,
about not just accepting what you're told, but looking for yourself, trying to understand how things really work.
and this is a big change from like the medieval mindset.
Huge change. Like in the Middle Ages, knowledge was mostly based on tradition, on what the church said, on what ancient authorities had written. But in the Renaissance, you get this new emphasis on observation, on experimentation, on using your own senses to understand the world.
So like the start of modern science.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's not quite the same as modern science, but it's definitely a step in that direction. And you have some really groundbreaking figures who are pushing things forward.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Well, one of the big ones is Nicholas Copernicus. He was a Polish astronomer, and he came up with this radical new theory about the universe.
Okay, what was that?
Well, at the time, everyone believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, like everything revolved around us. But Copernicus, he said, no, that's not right. The sun is at the center, and the Earth and the other planets, they all revolve around the sun.
That's a big claim.
It was a huge claim. I mean, it completely overturned the accepted view of the universe, and it was very controversial at the time. But it was also the beginning of a revolution in astronomy.
Right, because it changes everything, right? Like if the Earth isn't the center, then what does that mean for our place in the universe?
Exactly. It's a really profound shift in perspective,
Yeah.
and it laid the groundwork for later scientists like Galilei.
Oh yeah, Galileo.
Yeah, he was an Italian astronomer and physicist, and he made some really important observations that supported Copernicus's theory. Like he used a telescope to observe the moons of Jupiter, and that showed that not everything in the universe revolved around the Earth.
So he's providing the evidence for this new view of the universe.
Exactly. And he also did a lot of work on motion and gravity, which laid the groundwork for Isaac Newton's later discoveries.
So Galileo, he's like taking it to the next level.
Yeah, he's building on what Copernicus started and really pushing science forward.
Okay, so we've got these big changes happening in astronomy. What about exploration? Is there any of that going on during the Renaissance?
Oh yeah, tons of it. I mean, the Renaissance was this period of incredible curiosity,
Hmm.
about the world, about what lay beyond the known horizons, and that curiosity it led to a whole age of exploration.
So people are starting to sail further and further afield.
Exactly. And they're discovering new lands, new cultures, new plants and animals. I mean, it's really a time of incredible expansion of human knowledge and understanding.
And it's not just like random wandering around, right?
Right.
There are reasons why people are going on these voyages.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of economic motivation, like Europeans are looking for new trade routes to the east to get spices and silks and other valuable
So
goods.
it's about money.
Partly, yeah, but it's also about glory, about national pride, about pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Like there's this real sense of adventure.
Right, yeah.
And then there are religious motives too. Like some explorers are trying to spread Christianity to new parts of the world.
So it's like a mix of motives all kind of coming together.
Exactly. And some of these voyages, they're incredibly daring. Like Christopher Columbus sailing across the Atlantic, not knowing what he's going to find.
Yeah, that's a pretty big gamble.
It was a huge gamble, and it paid off in a way. I mean, he discovered the Americas, even though he thought he'd reached Asia. But it also had some really tragic consequences.
Yeah, the impact on the indigenous populations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the arrival of Europeans in the Americas, it led to disease and conquest and all sorts of terrible things. So it's a very complex story.
Yeah, it's not all, just exciting discoveries.
No, definitely not. It's a mix of good and bad, as with most things in history.
Okay, so we've got art, you've got science, we've got exploration, all happening during the Renaissance. What about like society in general? Are there any big changes happening there?
Oh yeah, huge changes. I mean, we've already talked about the decline of feudalism
Yeah.
and the rise of social mobility, and alongside that, you have the growth of cities. People are moving to cities to find work, to find opportunities, and the cities are becoming these centers of trade and culture and innovation.
And it's not just like economics driving this, right?
Mhm.
There are changes in how people think about themselves, about their place in the world.
Exactly. And that goes back to humanism,
Right.
this emphasis on individual potential, on the importance of education and critical thinking.
And this individualism, it's a big shift from like the medieval way of thinking.
Huge
Yeah.
shift. Like in the Middle Ages, your identity was mostly defined by your place in society, like
Hmm.
were you a peasant, a noble, a member of the clergy? But in the Renaissance, there's this growing sense that you can define yourself, you can achieve things based on your own merit regardless of your social background.
Okay, so it's like a more fluid society.
Yeah, definitely. And you also have the rise of a new class of people, the middle class, like merchants and bankers and artisans. They're gaining wealth and power, and they're becoming patrons of the arts. They're supporting education. They're really helping to drive the Renaissance.
So it's like a new power dynamic is emerging.
Exactly. And this new dynamism, it also has implications for politics. Like you see the rise of powerful city states like we've talked about, and
Yeah.
they're often ruled by these new elites, these merchants and bankers.
So the old aristocracy is losing its grip.
Yeah, in some places. I mean, it's not a complete break from the past, but it's definitely a shade in power.
Okay, and what about the church? Where does the church fit into all of this?
Well, the church it's still a very powerful institution during the Renaissance, but its authority is starting to be challenged.
In what ways?
Well, for one thing, you have the rise of humanism, which, as we've talked about, it kind of shifts the focus away from the purely religious to the human experience.
Right.
And then you have the rediscovery of classical texts, which sometimes contradict church teachings.
Right.
And that leads to some pretty heated debates.
So it's like people are starting to question the church's authority.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. And then, of course, you have the Protestant Reformation, which happens in the early 16th century, and that's a major break from the Catholic Church.
Right, Martin Luther and all that.
Exactly. And the Reformation, it's influenced by Renaissance ideas,
Hmm.
this emphasis on individual conscience, on interpreting the Bible for yourself. So it's all connected.
Okay, so the Renaissance it's shaking things up, even in the religious sphere.
Yeah, definitely. And all of these changes, they're made possible in part by the printing press,
Hmm.
because the printing press allows these new ideas to spread much more easily.
Right, the amplifier.
Exactly.
Ah,
And that leads to a much more educated and informed public, which in turn leads to more questioning, to more demands for change.
so the printing press, it's not just about books. It's about like a whole new way of thinking and communicating.
Exactly.
Okay, now we've been talking a lot about Italy,
Hmm.
but the Renaissance, it wasn't just an Italian thing, right?
No, definitely not. It spreads to other parts of Europe.
Okay, so how does that happen?
Well, it spreads through trade, through travel, through the exchange of ideas. Like scholars and artists from all over Europe, they travel to Italy to study, to learn, to be inspired. And then they take those ideas back to their own countries and they start to adapt them.
Right, so it's not just a copy paste situation.
No, it's much more organic than that. Like each country, each region, it kind of takes those Renaissance ideas and it makes them its own. It blends them with its own traditions, its own culture.
Okay, so give me some examples. Like, how does the Renaissance manifest itself in different parts of Europe?
Well, in England, for example, you have the Elizabethan era, which
Mhm.
is it's often seen as the height of the English Renaissance. And you have figures like William Shakespeare who are writing these incredible plays that are still performed today. And you have a flourishing of music and literature and architecture.
So it's like its own unique flavor of Renaissance.
Exactly.
Okay, what about other places?
Well, in Germany, you have the Northern Renaissance, which is it's a bit different from the Italian Renaissance. It's more focused on realism, on depicting everyday life. And
Mm.
you have artists like Albrecht Dürer who are really masters of this style. And you also have the development of printing in Germany, which plays a huge role in spreading Renaissance ideas throughout Europe.
Right, Gutenberg and all that.
Exactly. And then you have other countries like France and the Netherlands and Spain, which all have their own unique Renaissance experiences. So it's really this pan-European
That's like
phenomenon.
a wave that's spreading across the continent.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, now we haven't talked much about music yet. Was there a Renaissance happening in music too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, music was a really important part of Renaissance culture, and it underwent some pretty significant changes during this period.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, there's a shift from monophony to polyphony.
Okay, back up. What's monophony?
Monophony is it's music with a single melodic line. So like Gregorian chant, for example, which was
Yeah.
very common in the Middle Ages.
Okay, one voice at a time.
Exactly. But in the Renaissance, you start to get polyphony, which is it's music with multiple melodic lines happening at the same time.
So more complex, more layered.
Yeah, much more complex, much more interesting to listen to. And you have composers like Josquin des Prez who are really masters of polyphony.